One of the interesting things about Lahai-Roi as a map is that it is so multi-layered. As we've gone through in previous videos, the construction and Royan myths of Lahai-Roi show it's very inspired by Norse mythology, where the world is made up of many vertical layers connected by the world tree Yggdrasil. To preface, I do recommend watching my previous videos on how Lahai-Roi is connected to Norse mythology and the structure of the world for the greatest understanding, as I go through the two biggest players who shape the current map we are standing on, the Threnodian Aleph I, known as Virunga or Loki, and the Roya's deity, the Exostrider known as Balder. In Lahai-Roi, we theorize the Norse view of the world to be very apparent. The Exostrider's sword, which was plunged into the ground from the surface and stretches down every layer of the world, is parallel to the Norse world tree, Yggdrasil. The very first level, the Royan Frostlands, where the god the Exostrider Balder resides, is an analogue of Asgard in Norse mythology, being the top layer where the gods reside and where the final battle of Ragnarok, the series of events that will end the world, will conclude. The second layer, Lahai-Roi, is the residence of humans and is a parallel to Norse Midgard. Just like how the land of humans in Lahai-Roi is made up of the Exostrider's body, with the plants, animals, and even sun being parts from it, Midgard in Norse belief was created from the body of the giant Aemeath, who formed mountains, trees, rivers, and the whole land, basically. However, beyond this, we have very little information when it comes to what is under Lahai-Roi, despite how important it seems to be. If you've watched my previous videos or have been looking into lore of Lahai-Roi, it is clear that the Threnodian Aleph I, or Virunga, is being trapped underneath our feet, being pinned down by the Exostrider's sword past the Strider Gate. Based on the predictions of Ragnarok, where Balder's death is one of the events that kickstarts the end of the world, we theorize that something would happen to the Exostrider, which caused it to lose its grip on its sword, shattering the structure of the world and letting the Threnodian it was trapping to slip free. However, before we get that deep, both physically and metaphorically, I want to point your attention towards a lore entry you get from 100%ing the exploration of the Rebirth Uplands, which suggests there is actually a place in between the human settlement of Lahai-Roi and the Threnodian's Dimension at the very bottom of the world. From this passage, we gain knowledge of an underground cave called Sundermere Lakebed, which houses an odd object that is made of Exostrider material, fed by its energy from the reactor drive, and also held in some sort of suspended animation upside down, connected by possibly what is wires or vines. While some people theorize this is the Exostrider itself, I don't think this is actually possible, because we know for certain that the Exostrider is in the Royan Frostlands right now, slumbering from when it plunged its sword into the ground. When we consider the Exostrider's creations such as Hyvatia and the reactor husk, there is only really one option left for a massive entity that we know isn't accounted for yet, the Mecha Scout from Aemeath's drip marketing reveal. Considering that the shape in the lore entry is very likely a humanoid shape, this lines up really nicely with our current theories. If we go back to Ragnarok, we previously theorized that we would need to dive underground to confront the Threnodian before the final battle of the region would happen in the Frostlands, or basically in Asgard, just like how in Ragnarok, the final climactic battle happens here. When you combine this with the fact that Aemeath is releasing really early in 3.1, which hints that we're probably going to be diving underground and need her assistance because she seems to be the only person that can kind of move freely in this underground or Threnodian dimension, then everything we've talked about suggests that the mysterious object in the Sundermere Lakebed seems to be the Mecha Scout. Additionally, now that we know the Sundermere Lakebed exists under Lahai-Roi, but above the Strider Gate where the Threnodians contained, we can also link this as a Norse myth that structures the whole world of Lahai-Roi. My personal theory as of current is that the Sundermere Lakebed is an analogue to Norse Niflheim, the bottom of the known world in Norse mythology. Originally, I actually thought that the Threnodian's Dimension past the Strider Gate was Niflheim, but in the next section, I'll explain why I no longer think this is the case. The primary evidence based on what information we have for this is that Niflheim is home to a spring that feeds all the rivers of the Norse world, and is the furthest place that the roots of the Worldra Yggdrasil actually go past. We know that Sundermere is a lake bed, which seems to fit this sort of river imagery, perhaps of a giant underground cave that used to house a river, and we also can assume that the Exostrider's sword, an analogue of Yggdrasil, actually extends past Sundermere rather than ending here, suggesting that the Stridergate, which is what contains the Threnodian, exists underneath Sundermere lakebed. This actually pivots us really nicely to our final topic for today, which is the dimension of the Threnodian Lef-1, that exists even underneath Sundermere and past the Stridergate. In a previous video, we discussed that Virunga, the Threnodian of Lahai-Roi, was an infinite, uncountable existence that had the ability to both create and erase existence itself. Previously, we linked this to the Greek concept of chaos, a void from which all existence emerged, but the user Galileo actually has suggested there is a Norse version of this chaos dimension that I'd overlooked and honestly fits way better with what we've already theorized. Within the Poetic Edda, which is what we are using as our primary source for the Norse Ragnarok, there is actually a space underneath even the bottom of the known world, Niflheim, being the eternal and infinite void of Ginungagap, which is often translated as the Yawning Gap. The Poetic Edda mentions this directly, once in the 12th line of the Voluspa, and it has been taken to mean a void of nothingness from the beginning of time, that everything emerges from. Unlike the Greek conception of chaos, however, everything will also collapse back into the void, or Ginungagap, at the end of Ragnarok, the events that will end the world that we've talked so much about. So this could perhaps give us a clue of what the Threnodian's trying to do, as in erasing all of existence. Considering we definitively know that Lef-1 is the Threnodian of not just existence but also of the void, it seems clear that Ginungagap, which translates roughly to a magic or yawning void, is the dimension that it resides in, trapped beyond the Stridergate. However, this is not all. Within the lore entry, we know that the Exostrider's sealing of the Threnodian past the Stridergate is half-baked. It can only seal a portion of its power from the void, with the unsealed part running upward to Lahai-Roi to cause phenomena such as void storms. If the Stridergate was to be damaged, then there is a dual source energy or sort of frequency that would converge, spelling what we can only guess is the end of Solaris 3. There is a specific part of the Norse myth of the void of Ginungagap that seems to parallel this from the Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson. As we know, Ginungagap was a void from which all existence emerged. However, Norse creation myths are not an instant process. First, the two opposite worlds of Muspelheim, the world of fire, and Niflheim, the world of ice, was born. In between these two worlds lay Ginungagap, but as the heat of Muspelheim began to melt the ice of Niflheim, the magic water that came out of this process was what created the first life of the universe, being the primordial giant Ymir. As we know, Ymir's body was later used to fill in the void to make Midgard, which, in Wuthering Waves terms, is the land of the humans, or Lahai-Roi. The important thing here is that this emphasizes that Ginungagap, and possibly Venrunga and Loki, seems to inhabit a void of creation that is desperately trying to connect two sources of energy together, perhaps being that of ice and fire. As we talked about previously in a video on the Exostrider, it seems that Sol, the god of the Roya, who lives in the sky and is trapped beyond the etheric sea, is essentially an incarnation of the fire and the sun, and the Threnodian Lef-1, which brought on the Ice Age that froze the world above, is an incarnation of the ice and snow. If what is at the highest point of Lahai-Roi, being in the sky beyond the etheric sea, meets the melty ice at the lowest point, being below the Stridergate, underneath even the known world, would we see a cataclysmic creation of all ending, similar to the Norse myths of Niflheim and Muspelheim? However far-fetched this whole theory sounds, the next section of lore entry ends very ominously. As above, so below. As above, so below. As above, So below, above, and below. So I'm adding this postscript because I shit you not, 10 minutes after I exported the video, Aemeath's gameplay came out. So there's a couple of things I found pretty interesting with this, so just like talk a little bit about it, right? Let's just watch through it first. One thing I want you to kind of notice here, right, is the setting. I'm pretty sure this setting looks like some sort of underground area that we're probably going to be going into in 3.1. Most likely the Sundermere lakebed that I was just talking about in the video. But the other thing I found kind of interesting was the Mecha Scout integration. Now we know that Aemeath actually kind of merged into a Mecha Scout, but we don't really know that she merged this part, kind of like, this is what it looks like.
The world is mine to guard.
It looks like she can kind of like, almost like Frolova and Hecate, almost like function independently from the Mecha Scout. So the Mecha Scout isn't sort of like a cybernetic attachment. It's like a separate entity that can be merged, right? So both of them can function independently or merge together, which is interesting because then it kind of makes sense that it is sort of like a Exostrider creation.
Reach the cosmos.
And of course, like the big part that everyone's sort of like looking at is the fact that not only does she have 3 cutscenes, another cutscene, which as a whole is pretty massive.
Now, body limit unlocked. The savior rising.
So, very, very massive kind of like addition. This is probably going to be this 2-second scene, I think, power creeps Carter Fear's old animation by a little bit. But a couple of things, right? The first thing is that this Exostrider, this is the first clear shot we have of the Exostrider, besides just the screenshot we had from the Roy and Frostlands in the 3.0 teaser. And the other thing is that we actually now know what the tip of the Exostrider sword, which we talked about as Yggdrasil, actually looks like. It looks like, of course, like sort of like a gold tip with some sort of like energy running through it. And it seems like a sword, right? When I saw this, I was just like, this looks like Gungnir, like Odin's spear that never misses, looks like Gungnir. But the other thing, of course, is just like we have a sense of scale with the Exostrider. It's pretty fucking massive. And it looks pretty fucking cool. So besides that, there's not too much to talk about, but I did think it was kind of funny that I exported the video and gameplay just came out. So anyway, I hope you guys had a great time watching the video, and I'll be seeing you guys possibly next time in the 3.1 update, or 3.0.2.